a little boy ran inside the church crying and pointing towards the altar where Pastor Gabriel stood, saying, "He's a monster! He's a monster! He killed my mother!" But before we could figure what was happening, he was dragged out by the ushers, as everyone believed. Maybe he doesn't know what he's saying, since he's just a child. "Some pastors are evil," Mr. Tolu said. "He who treat a pastor like God is to be punished." It was a hot, silent evening in the bustling city of Lagos. The sun had just begun to dip behind the tall buildings, casting long shadows over the busy streets. But something was wrong in the heart of the city. Something that no one could see coming. St. Mary Church was a very big church in the neighbourhood, with its branches all over the world. People travel across the globe for Pastor Gabriel's healing and deliverances. Sunday services is always filled, weekly services ain't left out. Pastor Gabriel is the one God is using, people often say. Mr. Tolu and his family attended the church, as they were one of the beneficiaries of Pastor Gabriel's favour. Mr. Tolu had always trusted Pastor Gabriel. He was the kind of man everyone in the neighbourhood looked up to. Always helping, always praying, always so kind. I grew up in his church, and my family relied on him for everything. He said one time, when boasting about his church at his place of work, "Almost every Christian in the town of Lagos attended this church. Pastor Gabriel will usually hold a meeting for the widow and help them with feeding and other needs. Children are granted scholarships. Everyone respected him." One night, the city was alive with the usual noise. Cars honking, people shouting, and the distant sounds. Mr. Tolu was walking home from a friend's house, passing by the backside Pastor Gabriel's church, when he noticed something strange. The lights in the church were still on, even though it was already past midnight. Mr. Tolu couldn't help himself. He walked closer, thinking he might catch a glimpse of Pastor Gabriel finishing up a prayer meeting, but what he saw through the church window made his blood run cold. Pastor Gabriel wasn't alone. In the middle of the room, he stood over a large black bag, his back to the window, and in the corner of the room, something caught my eye. A human head. I froze. My heart pounded. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Pastor Gabriel, the man I had always admired, was standing in front of a human head. A head that wasn't just a prop, but real. I stepped back, my hand covering my mouth to stop myself from screaming. My mind raced. Was I seeing things? Was it a dream? But the sound of footsteps behind me snapped me back to reality. Someone was coming. I ran. I didn't even look back, just ran as fast as I could through the streets, the image of the head haunting my mind. For some days I didn't get myself, as I kept on saying, "I saw it wrong, it wasn't true. Maybe I'm mistaken, Pastor. Gabriel won't do such thing, he's a repeated man, and he can't do such." One evening, when I go back from work, I told my wife Deborah, as I couldn't take my mind off the misery. "Are you sure?" she asked, rubbing her head. "Pastor Gabriel, the man who helped us with food when your mother was sick. You must be mistaken." "Tolu, are you sure you're not just dreaming? That man is a respected pastor in this city," Deborah said. But I wasn't imagining things. I decided to investigate on my own. Every night I watched from afar. I saw Pastor Gabriel leave the church at odd hours, sometimes with bags that seemed far too heavy for someone who was supposed to be helping the poor. One evening, I followed him through the thick bush as he walks fast, making sure he wasn't followed. When he got to some certain point in the thick bush, he stopped and went inside an abandoned hut that looks very old. I didn't know this kind of hut is in the bush, as it was my first time seeing it. I followed him as I hid behind the window. What I discovered that night turned everything I thought I knew upside down. Pastor Gabriel wasn't just a pastor. He was a part of something much darker than I ever could have imagined. And no one would believe me. Not even when I tried to show them the truth. I couldn't sleep that night. The image of the human head, Pastor Gabriel standing over it like it was just another Sunday sermon, haunted me. My mind raced. Was he a monster? Or had I misunderstood? But deep down I knew what I saw. And it was something I could never forget. The next few days were unbearable. Every time I saw Pastor Gabriel, I couldn't look him in the eye. How could I? I felt like I was walking with a ghost, haunted by the truth no one else believed. I started to feel paranoid, like the city was closing in on me. No one would believe me. One day, I decided to tell a colleague at work. But his words stung, like they were mocking me. He said, "Why don't you turn to a comedian? Because Pastor Gabriel won't do such thing." I immediately thought about how I can expose him myself and let the whole world know the kind of person he is. When I got home that night, I looked for a note and I wrote everything I saw in details without leaving any clues. The next morning, on my way to work, a black car pulled up to the church. I squinted from a distance. It was the same car I had seen Pastor Gabriel drive before, but this time there were 2 strangers in the car with him. They looked serious, their faces hidden by dark sunglasses. They didn't look like people who came to pray. I couldn't resist. I followed them quietly, keeping my distance. They entered the church, but this time something felt different. This wasn't a prayer meeting. I had to find out what was going on. I waited for what felt like forever. When the sun had almost set, I saw Pastor Gabriel and the strangers walk out. But they weren't empty-handed. They were carrying something large wrapped in black cloth. I could hear muffled voices, but the street was quiet. My heart raced as I crept closer. Then, it happened. One of the men dropped the cloth, and what I saw sent a shockwave through my body. It wasn't a human head this time. It was a human body. A body of a young man, fresh and cold. His eyes were wide open, staring into the sky as though asking, "Why?" Tears welled up in my eyes. This wasn't just a terrible secret, it was a crime. A crime so big, I couldn't fathom how deep it went. The men and Pastor Gabriel started to speak in low voices, too quietly for me to hear. I leaned in closer, desperate to understand. My heart was thudding in my chest when one of them turned and caught a glimpse of me. He didn't say a word, he just stared, his eyes. I froze, but then I turned and ran faster than I ever had in my life. I didn't care if anyone saw me. I didn't care if they heard me scream. I had to get away. I had to tell someone, but who would believe me now? I rushed back home to my wife, I told her, but still she didn't believe me. When I told her everything, about the body, the strangers, the truth, she didn't react the way I thought. Instead of shock, her face went pale. "Tolu, you've got to stop, please," he begged. "Pastor Gabriel is not who you think he is." "But you have to believe me," I cried. "He's hiding something dark." Deborah lowered her voice, looking around nervously. "Tolu, do you know what kind of people we're dealing with? You have no idea how dangerous they are. If you expose them, they'll come for you, and for everyone you love." My heart sank. "What do you mean?" Deborah stood up, her face grim. "I've seen things too, but I kept quiet, as I believe I was mistaken. But with your claims, I think Pastor Gabriel is definitely not who we think he is." That night, I couldn't help myself. My mind was stuck on the incident, and I don't know when I grabbed my phone and started recording everything in a voice recording as I was ready to give it all it takes to expose him. I started recording everything I witness, as I don't have the courage to get proper evidence that I can submit to the police. One faithful day we went for Sunday services. The church was crowded as usual and everyone happy and joyful as they heard Pastor Gabriel's sermon, but something unexpected happened. A little boy ran inside the church crying and pointing towards the altar where Pastor Gabriel stood, saying, "He's a monster, he's a monster, he killed my mother." But before we could figure what was happening, he was dragged out by the ushers, as everyone believed. Maybe he doesn't know what he's saying, since he's just a child. The Sunday service continued as usual. Since that day, I have been searching to see if I would see the little boy. But it's been 5 days and I haven't seen or heard anyone talk about him. It's not just Pastor Gabriel, it's the whole church. It's a cult, Tolu. And once you're in, they never let you go. David said one night as he approached me, claiming he had some feeling Pastor Gabriel is not who people think he was. I stared at him, speechless. The pastor's church, the man I had trusted, was part of something far worse than I ever imagined. My whole world had just turned upside down. It was the 6th day since the boy's outburst in the church, and his words echoed in my mind like a haunting melody. He's a monster. He killed my mother. I couldn't shake it off. Where had the boy gone? Who was his mother? And why did no one else seem to care? I sat on my bed that night, clutching my phone. My voice recordings of Pastor Gabriel's late-night movements and the black bags he carried were growing, but they weren't enough. I needed proof, something undeniable. Yet, deep down, I knew I was playing a dangerous game. My wife, Deborah, had stopped trying to convince me to stop. She barely spoke to me now, terrified by the storm I was walking into. That night, as the city fell asleep, I decided to visit the abandoned hut in the bush again. I had to know what Pastor Gabriel was hiding. I didn't tell Deborah where I was going. If something happened to me, I didn't want her dragged into it. I slipped out of the house quietly, the streets eerily calm under the faint glow of streetlights. When I reached the bush, the silence was deafening. Every rustle of leaves sounded like a scream in my ears. My flashlight flickered, barely piercing the darkness, but I kept going. I could see the outline of the old hut in the distance. My heart raced as I crept closer. The air around the hut smelled foul, like decay and rot. I held my breath as I peeked through the cracked window. What I saw sent shivers down my spine. Inside, Pastor Gabriel was kneeling in front of a makeshift altar. Candles flickered around him, casting strange shadows on the walls. But what caught my attention was the centerpiece of the altar, a human skull resting on a blood-stained cloth. My stomach churned. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Pastor Gabriel began chanting in a low, guttural voice, words I couldn't understand. Then he reached for a small black box. He opened it, and inside was what looked like strands of hair. Tonight, the sacrifice will be complete, he muttered to himself, his voice cold and detached. No one will stop me. I felt a chill run down my spine. What sacrifice? Who was he talking about? As I leaned in closer, I accidentally stepped on a twig. The sharp crack echoed through the night. Pastor Gabriel's head snapped toward the window. His eyes locked on mine. "Who's there?" he barked, standing up quickly. I didn't wait to find out what would happen next. I turned and ran, crashing through the bush as fast as my legs could carry me. I could hear footsteps behind me, growing louder. Someone was chasing me. I burst out of the bush and onto the main road, panting and trembling. A car's headlights flashed in the distance. I waved my arms frantically, hoping they would stop. The car slowed down. "Tolu, what are you doing here?" he asked, pulling over. "No time to explain. Drive!" I shouted as I jumped into the car. As we sped off, I glanced back and saw a shadowy figure standing at the edge of the bush, watching us. My heart sank. They knew I had seen too much. When we got to my house, David parked the car and turned to me. "Tolu, you're shaking. What happened?" I told him everything. The altar, the skull, the chants, and Pastor Gabriel's ominous words about a sacrifice. David's face went pale. He rubbed his hands over his face and muttered, "This is worse than I thought." "What do you mean?" I asked. "I've been hearing rumors," David said, "about disappearances in the city, people vanishing without a trace. I thought they were just stories, but now... Tolu, what if Pastor Gabriel is behind it?" The thought made my blood run cold. All those people who trusted him, who worshipped him. They had no idea they were following a man who might be a killer. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. It was a text message from an unknown number. "Stop digging if you love your family." I showed the message to David, and he frowned. "They're watching you," he said. "You need to be careful." That night, I couldn't sleep. The fear of what might happen to Deborah and even David consumed me. But I also knew I couldn't stop. Too much was at stake. If I didn't expose Pastor Gabriel, who would? The next morning, I decided to go back to the hut, but this time I wouldn't go alone. I needed someone to witness what I had seen. I called David, and after some convincing, he agreed to come with me. We planned to go after dark when the streets were quiet. But something unexpected happened that evening. As I prepared to leave, there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, 2 men in black suits were standing there. They didn't smile. "Good evening, Mr. Tolu," one of them said. "Pastor Gabriel would like to see you now." My heart stopped. They weren't asking, they were telling. I swallowed hard, trying to mask my fear. "What does he want with me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The taller man stepped forward, his gaze cold and unflinching. "It's not for us to say, but he insists you come with us immediately." Deborah appeared behind me, her face pale with worry. "Who are these men, Tolu?" she asked, gripping my arm. But before the men could think of what to say, she said softly that she needed my attention with something inside. To my surprise, the men couldn't say a word. They just smiled, as if it were practice, and then turned to leave as I watched them enter the car and drove off. My wife Deborah asked who they were and what was going on, with a curious face. Thinking I had gotten myself in God's knows what, that night I became restless, because I knew it wouldn't be easy anymore, now that Pastor Gabriel has figured out I know something. But I kept on praying in my heart that I'm able to let the whole world know the kind of person he is. As I noticed, Deborah was fast asleep. I sneaked to pick up the note. I have been recording everything, and write down everything. I made sure I hid the previous voice recording I made, and I cleared my phone. I made sure I left no clue, as I was still determined to get to the root of the matter. The next morning, I got a call from David saying he noticed some strange man in his street, like they were looking for something. I told him how Pastor Gabriel's men came and how Deborah had saved me from going with them. We decided to see later. That even as we ended the call, and I dressed up for work. As I stepped outside, not too far from my house, I noticed a black car parked across the street. But I didn't think it would be Pastor Gabriel's people as I continue my walk. Before I could walk past the car, a man dressed in a black suit opened the car door and blocked my path, revealing 2 other men inside the car, sitting quietly. Their face hardened, they ushered me into the black car parked by the roadside. The ride was silent, except for the sound of the engine humming ominously. My hands were clammy, and my mind raced with questions. Were they going to kill me? Was this the end? The car stopped in front of the church, but it wasn't the main entrance. They led me to a side door I had never noticed before. One of the men opened it, gesturing for me to go inside. The air was heavy, the hallway dimly lit. We walked in silence until we reached a large room. Pastor Gabriel was sitting at a table, his Bible open before him. He looked up and smiled. Calm, almost fatherly, but his eyes held a darkness I couldn't ignore. "Ah, Tolu," he said warmly, gesturing to the chair opposite him. "Come, sit." I hesitated but sat down, my legs trembling beneath the table. The 2 men stood behind me like statues, their presence suffocating. "I've heard you've been curious lately," Pastor Gabriel said, folding his hands. His voice was smooth, almost soothing, but every word felt like a knife. Watching me, following me, asking questions. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. He leaned forward, his smile fading. "Curiosity can be dangerous, Tolu. You see, there are things in this world you're better off not knowing." I don't know what you're talking about," I stammered, trying to sound convincing. Pastor Gabriel chuckled, but there was no humour in it. Don't insult my intelligence. I know you saw me at the altar. The sacrifices. His eyes bore into mine. Do you think you're the first person to uncover my... What? My blood ran cold. Why? I whispered, my voice trembling. Why are you doing this? He leaned back in his chair, as if my question amused him. You wouldn't understand. This isn't about right or wrong. It's about power, influence, survival. His smile returned, colder than ever. You see, the people love me because I give them hope, but hope comes at a price. You're killing innocent people, I said, my voice rising with anger. Innocence is a matter of perspective, he said dismissively. You think the world is black and white, Tolu, but it's not. The very people who praise me would turn on me in a second if they knew the truth, but they don't, because I ensure they never find out. I clenched my fists, my fear giving way to rage. You won't get away with this. His laugh was low and menacing. Who's going to stop me? You? No one will believe you, Tolu. You're just one man against the church, against God himself in their eyes, and if you keep digging, he gestured toward the two men behind me, you'll find yourself disappearing, just like the others. The room fell silent, the weight of his words suffocating me. I knew he was right. No one would believe me, but I couldn't let him win. I had to find a way to expose him, no matter the cost. Pastor Gabriel stood, his towering presence filling the room. This is your only warning, Tolu. Stop now, or the people you love will suffer for your mistakes. He turned and walked out, leaving me with the two men. They escorted me back to the car and drove me back to where they had picked me up in silence. When I stepped out, my legs felt like jelly. I quickly ran too as I stepped out, until I feel many eyes were looking. I boarded a bus and went to the office. I was so restless, I kept thinking about my family. My wife and my child, Mary, she's just 8 years old. I didn't want her to suffer from this. I knew then that there was no turning back. Pastor Gabriel had made this personal, and now I had no choice but to fight back. But how could I fight a man who had the entire city, and my family, under his control?